End of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, we're going to jump on the Sharp Interactive board. We're going to go through Sharp's FY 2022, and I know a lot of you are waiting for this episode. You've read the reports out there. $1.9 billion losses at Sharp for FY 2022. You know, when I first started looking at these numbers, I was going to get a phone call. I thought I'm going to get a phone call from the folks over in Japan from Sharp, and they're going to say, "Hey, Ray, could you sell that interactive board and send us a check? We need the money." But you know what? They didn't call me up. And when I started looking at the numbers, I started feeling a little bit better. There's no way in the world that you could sugarcoat a $1.9 billion loss. No way in the world. But when you look at the history of Sharp, you look at their product portfolio, and you really get your head around what exactly they wrote off, it does make you feel a whole lot better. So let's jump on the Sharp Interactive board, and I want to share my thoughts on this. Let's talk about this $1.9 billion loss right off the bat. Again, first time they've had a loss since 2015. But $1.3 billion of the impairment charges are against the LCD business. It's in the display device business unit. It's related to a building. It's related to a factory, the machinery, the goodwill. Ladies and gentlemen, look, at one point in time, there was a president of Sharp that I guess wanted a factory. The good news is the president of Sharp that wanted the factory is no longer the president of Sharp. The bad news is there's a $1.9 billion loss for FY 2022. But let's look at the numbers of the overall Sharp company. Let's look at the numbers that relate to those friends of mine that sell supply and service print equipment. And then let's start thinking about Sharp, where they are today, and how they sit in the future. So let's jump in here and look at the first thing we got to do is talk about their top line revenue, and then we got to bring up this $1.9 billion loss again, and that's terrible. I mean, I know a lot of you are expecting a bathtub full of blood. And, you know, here's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. You know, imagine a bathtub full of blood, because it is a bloodbath, but I believe Sharp could drain the blood out and start over. You know, we see some of these OEMs that have these huge impairment charges. They have bloodbaths too, but you know what? They never get the blood out of the bathtub. They get some of it out, and then they start filling the bathtub up with more blood. It's like they're taking a bath in the same blood they were taking a bath in before. Was that graphic enough for you? But when I think about some of these OEMs, that's how I think. But the top line revenue for Sharp for the whole year was $18.4 billion. So this isn't a small company by any stretch of the imagination. Their losses were $1.9 billion. Boy, that's horrific. Let's get off that page. Let's look at some green numbers. I want to talk about the Smart Life business, and we know that's where all the appliances live. Top line revenue for FY 2022 is $3.4 billion. They had an operating profit of $207.7 million. 8K Ecosystems, and that's where the print business lives. $4.3 billion in top-line revenue for 2022. Operating profit was $98.7 million. It was only 2.3%, and they definitely need to pick up the percentage on that. And, of course, it's a lower percentage for FY 2022 because they got impacted by some of the massive losses that occurred. But you know what, folks? When you look back in history at Sharp, they're pretty consistent with having some pretty good operating profit, especially in that 8K Ecosystems division. ICT, and that's where that Dynabook lives, $2.4 billion top-line revenue. They had an operating loss of $40.5 million. The brand business total, those three categories, $266 million in operating profit against $10.2 billion in top-line revenue. This is where the problems occurred, the display business. $5.6 billion in top-line revenue, $489.1 million operating loss. Electronic device, $3.5 billion in top-line revenue. They had $109.3 million profit. Together in the device business unit, it was $380.1 million loss. So, ladies and gentlemen, you could see that there is some green on the board. And those friends of mine that sell supply and service print equipment, that you want to pay attention to that 8K Ecosystems. Although 2.3% is nothing to write home about, there's some OEMs out there, that's what they live with for like the last decade. This is just kind of a fluke for Sharp. When I think about this print business, and you know, Sharp did a lot of great things in 2021 and 2020 during the COVID. You know, there's some OEMs out there that are blaming COVID for all their problems. Sharp took advantage of COVID, if you will, by making sure that they do things right, by making sure that they treat their dealer community right, by making sure that they take care of supply chain issues right. And because they did a lot of things right during those 3 years, they gained some distribution. they're starting to really get recognized in the dealer world out there. And this is one of the reasons I believe that they decided to do that deal with Fuji on that production machine, and I'm not a big fan of that. I shared my thoughts on that when I reviewed their dealer meeting. And Sharp, I got to caution you on this. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it because I think it's a distraction. And you're coming out of this massive impairment loss, and for the company, not for you, not for the AK ecosystem, but for the company. But the scrutiny's going to be on the entire company. You're now in total control of the company. Foxconn no longer is in charge of Sharp. Sharp controls the company. Foxconn does not have the control and interest anymore, and this scrutiny is going to be on Sharp, and Sharp has got to make the right decisions, and they can't afford to make too many mistakes. And they need to figure this production machine out and figure it out quick. And if it's not going to work out, stop it. Because quite honestly, I think you might be able to get some dealers to sell that thing, but we don't recognize our industry, if we're honest, we don't recognize Sharp as a big production house. Now, I realize there's some benefits to doing this, but I also realize there's also a big distraction and there's also a big cost in doing this. I'm also very, very concerned about the IT services strategy, at least here in Americas. I want to learn a whole lot more about it, but I'm not comfortable with it because I see what's going on at Konica with they're all covered in that entire ecosystem that they never proved anybody is even profitable, and we could all guess it's probably not. And I don't want the same thing to happen to Sharp. When I think about Ricoh and what they're doing in the IT services sector, they kind of, that's just a kind of a whole nutty situation. They bought MindShift. They had these huge impairment charges, and you know what they're doing? They're doing the same thing they were doing that caused the impairment charges when they bought MindShift. They've been trying to get into this IT business and through acquisition strategy for over 15 years, and they have all these impairment charges. Now they're doing it again. At least with the Sharp impairment charges, I don't see them going out and trying to buy another factory anytime soon, okay? I think that the hiccup they had is not going to be repeated. What I find so bizarre is when I look at what Konica does with their impairment charges and their strategy. Let's go buy up a bunch of dealers. Let's go get rid of all the dealers. Let's go into IT services. Let's have some problems with IT services. Let's go buy an ERP system. Folks, at the end of the day, Ricoh and Konica seem to be repeating their problems, and I don't see that with Sharp. But I'm very, very concerned that Sharp's on a slippery slope, especially around IT services in that production machine. So I want to end it with this. There's three logos. We got Sharp, Ricoh, and Konica Minolta. Who has a better future and why? You know, when a company gets shorted, the shorters look at the company and they think to themselves, you know, what everybody thinks about this company, I think is bullshit. And I want to look a little bit deeper. And then they start looking a little bit deeper and they find out, oh yeah, it really is bullshit. The odds of them maintaining as a going concern are slim to none. Let's short the stock. And you know, if you were going to short two of these companies, which two would it be? I think it'd be Ricoh and Konica. You look at Konica Minolta and you realize they had all these impairment charges and all these losses. But then you go back in history and you look at them for like the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you think about all the things they did that didn't work out, and they're still trying to do the things that didn't work out, you start thinking to yourself, are they really building a house of cards? Same with Ricoh. When I think about Sharp, I think about the glass technologies. And folks, they got some fantastic glass technologies. I think about how they're positioned to work with dealers in the future. But what they cannot do is they can't try to build a Ricoh, they can't try to build a Konica, because quite honestly, those two organizations didn't work out. And I don't want that to happen to Sharp. Just some things to think about, my friends, because we all know this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.